Okay, ready. Hi, I'm Meta Spencer. Let's go to Australia, shall we? I haven't been to Australia my whole life, so this is going to be quite an adventure for me, although it's a bit vicarious. I get to talk to Dr. Bob Douglas, who is in Australia and who is somebody that I got acquainted with a year or two ago. Sort of by accident, I came across something saying that in Australia, there's a group of people who are starting off an organization to study something very similar to Project Save the World, in that we're all concerned about how to actually prevent several different global catastrophes that might put an end to civilization or to humankind. Either singly or all together, because they do tend to happen together. So I got in touch with those folks and had a lovely acquaintance getting started with Bob Douglas, who is part of the group. But we haven't kept in touch, and they've been going through some major changes in their organization. So this is my opportunity to get back in touch with him. And let's find out what the Australians are doing to save the world. And I'm very, very happy to say hello to you again, Bob Douglas. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm just great. And I'm delighted to see you again. Now, we're going to have to start at the beginning, because you sent me a little list of things that describe the organization. But you've changed their title. You were originally, a year or so ago, connected with the Australian National University organizationally, right? So why don't you give me kind of a quick history of your young organization?
Okay, well, maybe I can say a little bit about myself first.
Absolutely.
I am a retired public health academic.
Yeah.
I was the director of the National Centre for Epidemiology and Population Health at the Australian National University until I retired in 2001, 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. I was in my last few weeks at ANU, I was profoundly impressed by Fraser Mustard, who I'm sure you remember.
Actually, I remember his name as somebody very, very eminent, but I never met him. And I'm glad that when you mentioned him, I thought, oh, what an interesting coincidence that you know Fraser Mustard, because he's very important Canadian.
Yes, well, he visited Australia and advised us, and I was on the verge of retirement, and he said, why don't you start an equivalent body to the Canadian Institute in Australia? Mm-hmm. Several of us were really attracted to that idea. And so I spent several weeks in Canada looking at the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research and came back and we started.
You're going to have to actually tell even Canadians what that is, and to other people certainly, yes, because it's not something that many people know about here even.
No, and yet it still is punching above its weight around the world on a wide range of subjects, and in fact we're working in broad connection with them still. But we started this body, which is a multidisciplinary body administered by a voluntary board that looks at wicked problems of a policy nature that need multiple disciplines to come together and tackle them. Mm-hmm. One of the things that Fraser said to me was, massive change takes place not at the heart of disciplines, but at their intersections. And that has been an issue that we've pursued in Australia 21 for 20 years. We've had a very vigorous body that's been looking at all sorts of things, ranging from climate change to ecosystem services to death and dying and assisted dying to refugee policy to inequality, a whole quality of life, a whole range of topics that we've put out policy documents on. In the last 3 years, I and others became aware of a very important book by a science communicator, Julian Cribb.
He's an Australian, isn't he?
He is an Australian. He lives in Canberra, and he has an appointment as a science communicator at the ANU. He was the communicator for our government body on research for a number of years. And he wrote this book called Surviving the 21st Century, but he's written half a dozen others, including one that's just come out about chemical poisoning. But anyway, what Julian recognised was that we are on the verge of huge threats to human survival with a group of 10 intersecting catastrophic threats that nowhere in the world are we dealing with adequately. Certainly not in Australia, but nowhere is there a government or an organisation that is adequately dealing with these 10 threats. Mm-hmm. Now, you'll ask, what are those 10 threats? Clearly, most people would want to start with climate change, but they include also massive depletion of our resources on which humanity depends. They include destruction of other ecosystems. They include widespread uncontrolled proliferation of technology that's not being properly controlled, and that includes artificial intelligence. It includes weapons of mass destruction, including nuclear weapons. Mm-hmm. It includes pandemics of new as well as previously well-known diseases. We're not set up as a species to deal with these things. Right. It includes insecurity of our food supplies. All of it's driven to a very large extent by overpopulation by humans who are now probably using more resources than we can possibly contemplate unless we have drastic change in the way we manage ourselves. And finally, perhaps the biggest threat of all, and we see a lot of it here in Australia, is misinformation and denial that these threats are really existent or even serious enough to worry. Yeah. So what Julian has pointed to and what led to the formation of this group was the fact that nowhere is this being adequately dealt with. If humans are to survive, we're going to have to deal with them globally and all over the globe, and that's going to require fairly drastic transformative change in the way we all live.
Absolutely. That's a great summary of where, and I think, Project Save the World identified 6 global threats, and they're very, very related to what you've just done. We've got war and weapons, global warming, famine, pandemics, radioactive contamination, and cyber risks. I guess we don't have anything that I would call artificial intelligence, but that fits pretty much under the cyber risk category as well. So we're pretty much on the same wavelength. I think almost all of our issues exactly coincide with your concerns.
I'm not surprised they do.
It's reality.
It seems to me that there are a group of organisations that are starting to get involved in this. Mm-hmm. I mean, you've got the Centre for Existential Threats in Cambridge, and you've got the group in Oxford, Future of Humanity Institute. You've got the Stanford group, MAHB, that Paul Ehrlich's leading, and your own group, and so on. And there's the group in Portugal. So there's no question that people are starting to wake up to this, but we don't yet have a a global strategy for dealing with it. And if we don't get a global strategy, we're wasting our time.
Oh boy. Yes, boy. Oh boy. All right. You're right. You're right. And that is the daunting thing, you know. I think people can see one little corner of it. And more often the impetus they have is to narrow it instead of to expand it, you know. So we need to really push hard to get much more awareness of how these things are connected. Mhm. And how
Yep.
therefore I don't know. I mean, I was just talking to somebody about, wouldn't it be great if the United Nations were able to take some leadership role in looking at these things?
I
But
think
I don't
ultimately
see
they
it.
have to.
No, they don't have the political clout to do it. So where do you see the potential for getting some kind of real leadership?
Well, we've begun to think quite a lot about that. I hadn't mentioned that our leader is a bloke named Professor John Hewson.
Mhm.
John was the leader of the federal opposition in the national government in the late 90s. He's a highly accomplished economist and has got a chair in economics at the ANU. He has really been the driving force for this development, along with Julian Cribb and myself.
Is Cribb connected to the organization, or just
Oh yes,
the
yes.
brain power behind the?
We have a small management group of 4 that is driving the organisation with an advisory panel that we hope will be 35 or 40 before it's through. At the moment, we have about 12 senior advisors from around Australia, and we are approaching top people around the world to be part of the panel. We have a fundraising group that has connections to the United Nations, and we ultimately believe that if we're going to address this problem or these problems in a constructive way, we have to have a global network.
Okay, perfect. I absolutely agree. Okay, but I keep looking for who's going to take the leadership role, and I don't know. I guess maybe, you know, it's a matter of we do what we can where we are and try to knit together a network of organizations that are all working on similar lines. So we should, for example, our effort has mostly been to create a website that should be really useful to people,
Yeah.
and to create, I have a talk show every day where I interview somebody really influential or important, and we put those up. So somehow if we can begin sharing more information, you know, put your material on our website and that sort of thing, maybe that can help. Mhm.
Well, we have 2 websites. We've got the Council for the Human Future website and the Australia 21 website.
All right, now tell me, I think you've gone through some organizational evolution since I talked to you. It was one kind of title a year ago, and you've changed direction to some extent.
Yes, I mean, we started out, as I mentioned to you earlier, essentially operating within the Australian National University.
Mhm.
And we realised that wasn't going to be adequate for the purposes, and so the key people re-established the network as part of Australia 21 as a Council for the Human Future, and we're building these global networks as we go. We held a global conference in March of this year in association with Paul Ehrlich's group in Stanford, and also the Portuguese group, in which we tackled this, and I don't know whether you've seen that, the references to that. That's all
No,
on our website.
please, I hope you'll elaborate. I want to hear all about it.
Well, it was run over 2 days. It involved really a higher caliber global group of speakers on things ranging from population to pandemics to ecosystem destruction to climate change. So we had each of the 10 threats covered in major presentations, which are all online and are accessible to a global audience. We are at the moment in the process of putting together the broad advisory council group that we hope will meet 2 or 3 times a year virtually to keep the process online. And we're also building links to key people, and we've got one link that we're working towards the United Nations Environmental Fund, and we're also working to build a broad constituency in Australia of supporters for this, but it's preliminary days still.
And now you're calling it the Council for the Human Future.
Human Future.
And you're based in
Canberra.
Okay.
In Canberra.
That's where you are located yourself right now.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where most of our work emanates from. John Hewson lives about 100 k's away from Canberra, 150 k's away from Canberra. The rest of the management group lives in Canberra. But we're building on the past to try and establish something that could be global. Now, I don't know what your feeling is, but my feeling is we've only got less than 10 years to determine whether humanity will survive or not.
Well, I haven't put a number on it, but I don't even, when you say 10 years, I can almost shrug because, yeah, that's as good a number as any I know of. I've just spent today with a talk show with several climatologists who are talking about the changing currents in the world's oceans, and the possibility that there could even be an extinction event caused by the stratification of the oceans with the emission of hydrogen sulfide from the oceans. And when you look at a thing like that, one person might say, oh, it'll be 1,000 years in the future. And another person would say it could happen overnight, So we were really, dates and numbers are pretty iffy, but it certainly is not anything to play with. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, I think the other point we need to mention is that there are intersections and interactions between all of these 10 catastrophic threats. So it's not much good dealing with one at a time. We really have to, change the world thinking to not just say, let's deal with climate change, let's deal with extinction of species, or let's deal with resource depletion, or let's get population down. We've got to do the lot. Mm-hmm. We're talking all the time with various groups about ways forward, but one has to say, is this remotely feasible to make the changes necessary? Well, I'm optimistic that it could be, but I don't underrate the complexity or the difficulty of doing so.
Tell me about this program that you did with the people in Stanford, and you mentioned a Portuguese group. I don't know about that group.
It's called, the Future of Humanity, is it? Is
it based in Portugal, or?
It's based in Portugal, and we had a speaker from that group in the group, but the the entire proceedings of that conference are on the council website, and you can download each of the 13 presentations that covered all of the things I've been talking about. So, as I say, we're still in an early stage, but I think a lot of people think we're bloody mad trying to do this. It's hopeless. I don't think it's hopeless yet, but I think it's people like you that give me hope.
Well, let's tell me a little bit about the transition you've been through. You're still based in Canberra, but your structure changed to some extent. So I'm a little curious about how that came about and why you did it, why you feel that it may be, what kind of adaptations you were making, what were the grounds for this change in structure?
I don't know that it's helpful to go through that very much, because I wasn't personally the prime mover for that change, but it came about because we recognised that if we were going to really do this properly, we had to raise very serious money, and we had to go to really big philanthropic contributors, and we haven't got that money yet. But we are approaching several big contributors, because we believe we have to embark on an index of survivability that could become would go on the news channels of every channel around the world that says, we made this progress, or we deteriorated in this way. We're on a hiding to nothing at the moment, and so as I say, I'm not going to answer all of your questions about structure, because I don't think it's very, very profitable to do so.
No, okay, I don't mean to pry or anything. What I'm thinking is, did you decide that you did not want to be connected with a university, but that you needed to be autonomous, or did it have to do with the notion of more independence from government? Because those are factors that other organizations may need to bear in mind. I think the other institutions that you mentioned globally that are dealing with similar things are at universities mostly. The Oxford one, the Cambridge one, the Stanford, I think you say Paul Ehrlich.
Yes.
That's, and I don't know how many others there are.
That's true, and I think we thought initially we could probably do it within the university structure. We might still have been able to do it, but the bottom line was that the group, the influential group, decided that we really needed to be part of an independent body like Australia 21, and that's why we moved to that, and we renamed ourselves the Council for the Human Future.
Okay.
It's fair to say that the university group that we established is still extant. It still operates as a commission, and it's doing some of the things that we did before. But what I'm really saying is that the view was that this was too big for the framework in which we were operating.
Okay, because I thought it might have been related to something that some of us have experienced, who are academics and who find that, now you wouldn't have experienced that being a physician, an epidemiologist, because there's certainly nothing about medicine that anybody would try to keep out of the range of practical activism. But political scientists, for example, who have a lot of the skills that we need to draw upon for the research and for the leadership in some of these issues, oftentimes feel, either political scientists or other social scientists, that they can't freely do too much advocacy, because there's a kind of a norm of being value free to some extent.
Yes.
And
Well, I think-
so I thought maybe it might have to do with that. For example, I was just speaking with somebody, Lloyd Axworthy, last week, who used to be Canada's foreign minister. He was a superb foreign minister. He took the leadership very much on things like the Landmines Treaty and a number of global disarmament issues. But he had started off in connection with an institution at the University of Waterloo, and well, in the Waterloo area. And again, he felt that they wanted it to be very academic. So they too have become separate from this academic kind of environment, with the idea that what they're doing is that his new organization is one that works on refugees. It's a council for world refugees and migration, I believe it is. This kind of thing does happen. And I was a little bit curious about whether or not one has to take that into account. But then there are certainly groups at Oxford and Cambridge that seem to be forging ahead. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, we watch what's going on there with great interest. Mm. But I think it's fair to say that they are not changing government policy very substantially. They're operating as intellectual arbiters of the seriousness of things, but I don't know that they are moving to change the world in the way that I think you are and we are.
Okay, there you go. I think that's absolutely true for the most part. That when I worked as a professor, I found I was constrained a little bit. The norms of academia are a little different from the norms of people out in the street demonstrating. Although I have other friends here in Canada who teach peace studies, for example, in universities, who say that their students come and get them and pull them to join the demonstration with them, and so on. So it's not evidently a universal feeling that you have to be careful to be above the political fray. Okay, so you are actually hoping to have an impact, and your effort is to reach out globally.
That's absolutely correct. Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, that doesn't mean we're not acting locally. We spent yesterday afternoon, in fact, meeting with the local Greens component of the local Australian Capital Territory government, suggesting that that they could be the first government in the world to be acting on this 10 threats, and we've proposed to them that they should agree to establish a citizen assembly to consider the whole issue in this territory, because we're a small effectively it's not a proper state, it's a territory of about 400,000 people.
What is this territory?
The Australian Capital Territory. It is the home of the capital.
Okay.
It's the home of the federal parliament. So we have two parliaments. We've got a federal parliament, and we've got a legislative assembly that manages the territory.
Is this something like Washington, D.C., which is a district that's not not a state or a province, but okay. Exactly. All right. I didn't know how you were run there. I've never been to Australia. Okay.
Yeah. You better come sometime.
Oh, okay, could be. Okay, so you're going to have you done any direct effort to? Are you doing things like contacting politicians or parliamentarians and so on, or how do you foresee political activism? Certainly on a global scale, it's really kind of hard to see how to do it beyond one's own state.
Well, yes, we were speaking with 6 politicians yesterday, and I've got arrangements to speak to somebody from another party today about the need to get a consensus in the legislature that these issues have to be tackled by government as well as the community. And that's why we're proposing a citizen assembly. Now, I don't know whether we'll get it up, but we're making a good fist of trying to get it up.
I think the Citizens Assembly is a great idea because I'm preoccupied with the what I consider the brokenness of democracy. We are having, in so many countries, we're having a really hard time getting any action moving forward on serious issues because there's just not the political support for it. And I suppose because as well there are corporate interests and other interests that interfere.
And there is no doubt that our political system in Australia, our national political system, has been hugely influenced by the fossil fuel industry because we have a massive fossil fuel industry, and a lot of jobs dependent on it, and so we've had this denialist group in the federal government who've said all this is rubbish, the climate change thing, and so we really do have a problem of the control of our parliamentary systems by especially the federal parliamentary system by the fossil fuel industry.
But you're not an oil producing country, and I don't think of you as a coal producing.
We produce an awful lot of coal and coal seam gas, and so fracking's going on, and it's all there, and we do have oil in the Gulf.
Okay, well, I think it is a problem that it's not just in Australia, although I'm curious to hear more about the Australian government, which I consider pretty backwards as far as in general. But I don't know enough about it to have that kind of opinion. But certainly you're not alone. I mean, the whole world has been going through this regression toward a very conservative outlook. And it's kind of hard for me to understand why we had a Trump, why we have Putin, why we have Bolsonaro, why we have Duterte, why we have Modi, et cetera, why the world is in such a mood when what we need is the exact opposite. And I have difficulty seeing, understanding why that at this moment in history, why this is happening and how to overcome it, really.
Well, I mean, as I mentioned, we do have a very good territory government in the ACT.
Oh, really?
We have a very inadequate federal government, and we're wondering whether we can sort of set things going in the territory government at this stage to get, because, as I say, our analysis of the problem is that we're not going to survive unless governments around the world work together on this combination of issues. I don't think it's a dog's chance, and so I think everything, as far as I'm concerned, depends on us beginning to activate communities and governments to say, yes, we are interested in surviving. We're interested in our grandchildren surviving. So we are talking about a survival policy.
Okay. Well, certainly there are places where there's a corner that's been turned. I think the U.S. sort of, you could say, with the Biden administration, they're certainly coming out the other side, but it's still a very moderate government. I see. I was taking a lot of hope from the notion of the Green New Deal as a model that brings together a number of different proposals. But it doesn't include.
It hasn't really taken off in the US, has it?
It hasn't. On the other hand, Biden's infrastructure deal includes a lot that would be in the Green New Deal. He doesn't call it that, but there are similarities. I think both of them, the shortcoming as I see it, is that the lack is for any plan to diminish commitment to militarism. And if we talk about overlap, how we can show the connections between some of these global issues. Well, the most obvious global issue is simply money. That what you spend on one problem, if you're spending it on the military, for example, you don't have it to spend on anything else. And so if we want to show the relevance of the two issues and how I think the campaigns against weapons of mass destruction or of major militaristic institutions has to be linked to the effort to save the planet from global warming. And the most obvious connection is simply money, budgets. And as far as I can tell, none of the countries that I know are really changing their budgets from military expenditures to the kind of investments in major changes for global warming.
No, we're in furious agreement, Meta.
I'm sorry?
We are in furious agreement.
Yeah. Is that true about Australia? Your budget for the whole country, that there's a military component that is excessive?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and of course we see our closest allies, the United States, and we do everything the United States wants us to do. We go to Iraq, we go to Afghanistan, we go to Vietnam. We do all those things essentially as puppets of the US.
Okay. Well, okay. Now tell me about, you're an epidemiologist. Bring me up to date on not only what's going on in Australia vis-a-vis COVID, but what your council is proposing in response to the challenges of preventing further pandemics.
Well, just first of all, to take a bird's eye view of Australia, we did lockdown activity very quickly, and we kept the incidence of COVID pretty low around the country for the first few months. The advent of the latest aggressive strain, what is it called?
Delta?
The Delta strain has changed that in Australia. And about 2/3 of the country is currently in lockdown. The biggest problem has been in New South Wales, which delayed its lockdown for a long time, and they're going through fairly nasty time. I mean, I was an epidemiologist. I trained most of the epidemiologists who are now running the national program, but I've kept right out of the process of the COVID pandemic. But what I consider we need above all in Australia is a National Centre for Disease Control. We don't have one.
Oh.
And I did do a lot of work with the American CDC. I was involved in the early development of pneumococcal vaccine many years ago. So I think we have to get new structures in place in Australia, because at the moment we're doing it on a kind of state by state basis, and with national advisors advising each state premier on what to do. That hasn't worked very well in this second phase of COVID, and we're feeling the price of it.
Well, as an epidemiologist, I guess one of the questions that you probably have thought about is the question of how much you want to have a global, fairly authoritative system of response to preventing pandemics, and to what extent is it really preferable to have more local autonomy in managing these things. I've had several conversations lately in which it's not just about pandemics, but pandemic would be a good example. If one model would be to have a World Health Organization with a whole lot of authority to quickly identify emerging pathogens in various parts of the world and send out an alert such that everybody, all the countries would have to quickly respond and go into a lockdown or whatever other measures were necessary, or at least have countries work at the federal level, at the national level, as opposed to what is certainly the most egregious model is what we've seen in the US under Trump, when he simply allowed every state to make its own decisions. Or maybe maybe it wasn't just Trump that made that a policy, because the constitutions may have set it up that way. But I've heard people say that it's probably a good thing to give more leeway for local people to take more initiative to handle issues such as pandemics, or whereas other people would say, no, if you have a central government with a lot of authority, as for example in China, they quickly clamp down and lay down the law about who's allowed to do what in a very draconian manner. Some people feel that is overall a more effective approach. What do you think? And do we need to do more global centralization of authority, or is it better to allow more cities to take the initiative and that sort of thing?
I don't think it's clear, the distinction. I think you've got to do both to some extent. I think we have got to establish a better global framework than we've got. But I also think that, and I think we need a better national framework than we've got in Australia. At the moment, we've got what we call a national cabinet, in which the Prime Minister meets with the premiers once or twice a week throughout this COVID pandemic. And they did very well for the first little while, and then the states have become more independent, and we've developed a situation that's really become a bit critical in New South Wales recently, where they went a different way to the rest of the country. So I do think that I don't think it's an easy answer to your question, first of all. I do think you have to have, as a species, we've got to deal with pandemics as a species. It's not going to be enough to deal with them entirely locally. But we also have to get better technology and systematic management of the whole issues of quarantine and of isolation and case finding and so on. Not a good answer to your question, I'm afraid, Mena.
Well, I think the answer is always debatable anyway, because since smart people I've talked to have different points of view about this, and it may not always be the same answer. I don't know. Okay, what can you tell me about what you are doing by way of showing the connections among these things, among these different threats? And I think that is the real challenge, because people address these, if they do it at all, and there's too much denial, obviously, but insofar as there are organizations working on these threats, they tend to be working in silos, as it were, and independently, rather than seeing any value in forming, a single platform or a single system for approaching the government with all the demands in a package.
Well, this is where the whole Canadian Institute model, Australia 21 model, comes into real benefit.
Oh.
We have run a number of interdisciplinary roundtables, ranging on the issues of the overall 10 threats. If you look at the website, you can see a roundtable report on surviving and thriving in the 21st century, which in fact takes the whole 10 threats together. We did one on food security, in which we brought the best interdisciplinary minds we could identify around Australia together to look at the whole question of Australia's future food security. That led to a report on what Australian policy could be about food security, because it's looking very, very iffy in the longer term.
It's looking what?
Very, very uncertain in the longer term. Food security.
Is this related to all these wildfires and other climate change issues in Australia? I don't know. Has Australia been hit harder than some of the other continents?
We were hit very hard last summer.
Mm-hmm.
No, summer before last. In the lead up to COVID.
Mm-hmm.
There were huge destruction of ecosystems across Australia. Quite a lot of farmland was lost. Yeah. But I think the whole food security thing is much more complex than that. I mean, mm-hmm. it relates not just to destruction of farmland, and it's also to the whole farming systems and the role that big food marketing systems have on the way things are done, and the way we manage topsoil and the way we manage pesticides and so on. So it's as I say, we found the Australia 21 Canadian Institute approach ideal for looking at these kinds of questions. And we did the same with climate change. We did the same with a round table, which we said, where is Australia going? We call it Wither Australia, W in brackets H, ITHER Australia question mark.
Yeah. Well, tell me about Australia 21. Is that what you called it?
It's what we call it.
I don't know anything about it.
Well, we began in 2001 after I got back from Canada. And we pulled together a multidisciplinary board of top people from around Australia. And that board, there are still only about 2 of us still in that original list, but we have a changing group. It's diverse expertise, and we tackle a whole range of issues. The most recent have been around inequality and around assisted dying, around we did a lot of work on climate change and ecosystem services in the early days. We've done work on refugee policy and put out reports. As I say, I don't think we can claim we've dictated government policy on any of these things, but I think we've stimulated discussion around the nation on many of them, and we're seeing little pieces coming into play.
Well, it's like an institute. Is that it? What do you have an office building? Do you have what do you do? Do you have a staff of researchers? Are you connected with the university? Do you publish? I'm not sure what you do.
We have an office building which we don't use much. We've got a part-time executive officer who works about 12 hours a week. We've got a board of about 15 people. We tend to raise funds for whatever issue we're working on at the present time through either philanthropy or through. So we say, well, we're going to run a round table on algal farming or on continuing inequality.
Okay, so you have like roundtables, and then you do you have a website?
Yeah. Australia
And you
21.
have but now your new council on the human future is connected to Australia 21.
It is part of Australia 21.
Okay.
It is a major ongoing we've got two major ongoing programs in Australia 21: the Council for the Human Future and mindfulness, empathy, and compassion. And those two projects run sort of as semi-independent, but as part of the subset of Australia 21.
Mhm.
The mindfulness, and we had a major Australia 21 conference in April this year, which I'll also send you the details of, from which looked at the whole range of things that we've been looking at over the last 4 or 5 years.
You know, I think one thing that we could think seriously about is the usefulness of cooperating in identifying priorities for what are the questions that we most need to answers to, empirical and factual and scientific answers. Because you know, for example, my talk show today was about the changing ocean currents resulting from global warming and the effect that it will have on the world's climate and even on.
What was this talk show, Netta? This is on Canadian TV or what?
No, it's on YouTube, and it's on our website. We put them up on the website.
Okay.
To savetheworld.ca. So they're all available. There are 300, today's was number 314 of these conversations, and they're really quite smart people. I think you'll find them very, very, very interesting. But one of the things that often comes up is after a long conversation, somebody will say, well, here's the thing. This is what we really, really need to know that we don't know yet in order to solve this problem. So, for example, one guy today was saying, you know, the ocean currents, there's a certain place where they used to, it was like a funnel or something where they go, this convection, like a conveyor belt would be moving these currents from the top of the ocean down and underneath, according to the temperature and the salinity of the water. And all of this, there's a certain place where they go down the tube. They're called a chimney, and it's not working anymore. So you need the most critical thing that we need to solve this question about how long it's going to take and what we need to do is to find out what's happening with these chimneys, but nobody's funding them. So to identify really crucial questions that urgently need answers that would help all of us make critical decisions about what policies to develop. I think that would be a very helpful thing for us to focus on. If we could have a process for narrowing it down and coming up with a list of these are the empirical, factual pieces of evidence that we need for each of these crucial questions. And then we'd have an agenda that I think would have a lot of value. We could take it around and sell it to the IPCC, for example, promote it and say, IPCC, you need to focus on providing quick answers to these questions because they're not enough focus. Lots of times they don't know what to fund, for example. You know, what issues are most urgently needed. I'd like to talk to your people about, look through what you've produced in this show that you did the other day with Paul Eric's people and the Portuguese outfit, and see if in there are indicators of what specific issues need the most urgent attention.
I think they all do, but each one was a very senior expert clarifying what they saw to be the challenges.
Some of them, they don't know the answers, though. You get down and there's a certain question, they say, well, that's really the question, we don't know yet. Yeah. And so to some extent, it is a question of knowing what to put our highest priority on trying to solve. But I fully agree with you that one of the most important things is land use and how to do better agriculture. One of our platforms, one of the planks, we are concerned about famine, and you talk about food security. It's just clearly the same issue. But until recently, we would say that the only famines that have been caused in the world in the last 20, 30 years, I don't know how long, have been not acts of nature, but political actions, military actions, ways of trying to starve another population into submission because you're at war with them or something, or an ethnic group into submission. So I think the connection to the warfare is clear. The connection to pandemics is clear because diseases spread where there's shortage of food, and there's a real connection between malnutrition and disease. There's certainly a connection to global warming, because now, I mean, we're pretty sure that in the next 10 years there'll be shortages of food caused by climate change that we have to handle, and it hasn't happened yet, but it's going to. Yeah. So looking at how these things intersect, pandemics and food shortage and war and climate change are all connected to
resource use and human population. So, I mean, one of the things we really have to do is work out how do we reduce the human population rather than just let them be poisoned or die of starvation. And we've done quite a lot of thinking about that, and clearly no government in the world is wanting to really tackle this problem. People don't talk about the population size. We have governments encouraging people to have babies. I mean, you'd probably be quite interested to listen to the talk that Julian gave at the Australia 21 conference. I'll make sure you get that talk, because he reckons we have to be actively promoting a policy of global population reduction by probably 60 or 70% by 21. No, sorry, 21 in the next 100 years.
100 years to bring our population size down to what?
Down to probably about 2 billion.
2 billion.
Yeah.
Well, that's an ambitious goal. I mean, ambitious or a horrible goal, because we could get there the wrong way.
Well, we're heading to get there the wrong way. We may be down to zero.
Yeah. I hate to say that. You might be right, but this is not a good way to end our conversation, Bob. I want to have some hopeful and upbeat solution, but it's the hour is coming to an end, and all I can say is that we should be exchanging our information more, and see if I can get, I haven't looked at your website. I was not mindful of this conference that you held. So it's something that I will want to see. And so, let me have a look at it and see what we can do.
I'll send you a few key links, Netta.
Okay. Well, bless you. Carry on, and let's stay in touch. And
Okay.
I'm grateful to you for this, and very hopeful about the future.
Yeah, I'm a mad optimist.
Okay, give my good greetings to your friends and colleagues in Australia.
Thank you very much.